Alright, folks. Need some serious kind of help here. I think I got everything figured out, but I tried to do the big three and mess some things up pretty bad. Let me show you what's going on here. Damn, I wish I had them. I do. Okay. This right here is my new battery terminals on. I did this last weekend, by the way. Not this weekend. This right here is my 4 gauge that of course goes to my alternator. It was hooked up to this. Or it wasn't this. This was actually going to my ground. This was going to my ground. I'll start with my ground, sorry. This is going to my ground. That's my ground going to my engine block. And all I did was I switched it and put it in there for right now. But what I did was I cut this ground and I couldn't get to the engine block. So I went ahead and just hooked it up to this, and I was going to deal with it later. So I still kept that ground. Because on this terminal I have 2 8 gauges, like a positive over here. Sorry you can't see it real well. But I figured I'd just use that ground anyway and hook up an extra one to the engine block and have like an extra ground. Figured it wouldn't hurt nothing. So what I did was, for temporary, I hooked that up and I ran my 0 gauge from here up there to my strut tower. So that was hooked up. The way this started out was this cable went to my battery terminal like it is now. This little 8 gauge went to my battery terminal. This goes to my fuse block. And this guy right here was not cut. This guy was one solid piece. So I did not hook it up to my battery terminal. Turns out this goes to my starter. And let me kind of lay some wires in here to show you what I had going on. See that burn right there? I just did that burn by accidentally touching this guy to that. And I touched that into something. Look at that. Screwing some shit up already. Anyway, I had this big wire. This went to the alternator. This side went into here. So I unhooked this. So this was unhooked. I had my 0 gauge running to my alternator. Alright. So I had this going to my alternator. The red wire was unhooked. I hooked this little 8 gauge in, so I just had 2 wires going in my positive. 8 gauge, 0 gauge going to the alternator. This was unhooked. This stayed one solid piece. Was not cut, was not messed with. My ground had this big guy going to my strut tower, and since I couldn't do the engine block at the time, I stuck this back in the 8 gauge spot and had it as like an extra ground, so I had 2 grounds. What happened was my engine wouldn't, the starter wouldn't turn over. It's like I turned the key and nothing happened. So I don't know if it was because I blew this fuse right then. This is my ignition fuse, or what, but what I did was I ended up cutting this wire because I didn't know what it was at the time, and sticking one side in and trying it and nothing, and then I stuck the other side in and tried it and nothing. So then I went ahead and hooked my 4 gauge back in with my 0 gauge. So I had the 0 gauge and the 4 gauge going in. And I got it to start, but my starter kept running, so I burnt my starter out. So, I don't know, things happened, and then my dash lights all went out. So, I'm hoping this is my dash lights, and I can replace the starter and everything will be okay. And what I'm thinking about doing is doing like what I call a huge 3 upgrade, which is running this, leaving my alternator connected and running this into there, because this is where my amp's going right now and I won't need to use this. So I'll put my alternator, my factory alternator in here, and leave it hooked up, and also run the 0 gauge to my alternator. So I have 2 wires coming from my alt, and have like a super volts running through, keeping this hooked up and leaving this alone, because I found out this is my starter and I don't think that should be messed with. And then of course doing the regular getting to the engine block and having the engine block running 0 gauge, leaving this hooked up and run it and run to my strut tower. So I'll have 3 grounds and my 0 gauge running to my power, this also running, since I have an extra hookup over here that I won't be using, because I'll be putting my 0 gauge in here that's going to be going to my amp, and having this for my accessories, leaving this guy alone. And hopefully everything will work out. I hope it will, because I think what I done was I either I had a ground hooked up over here, or even if I didn't, I forgot and I left this hooked up the whole time, and this goes to my amp, which was grounded. So the battery was grounded the whole time. I messed with the alternator wire and everything. So I think everything will work out. And I'm going to do the what I call the huge 3 upgrade. So give me some input on that, because I don't want to blow up any more fuses or starters. Yep.